Namaste. My name is Preity and I am a global thought leader and a multimedia personality. Welcome to my podcast, The Preity Experience. Join me as I explore some of the most fascinating and crucial issues that affect our world today. I take a unique global perspective on these issues, and the very foundation of my insights is humanity and spirituality. I'm Preity Uppala, and welcome to the Preity Experience.
India's Army Vice Chief is now going to be holding the 2+2 dialogue in Washington. This comes immediately on the back of the developments of our foreign minister holding that Quad meeting in Japan just a week ago. There are so many other things that are happening at the global front. We have been talking here on Newsx for many weeks now that there is a requirement for a cogent structure within which all these conversations are now happening. At one level, that cogent structure can be the Quad, but at the grander level, it must be revolving around a broad agreement based around an Indo-Pacific Charter. An Atlantic Charter was signed between FDR and Churchill in the middle of a very tumultuous time of a great war, and that set the tone for pretty much all the other organizations that came up in the next 2 decades. GATT, NATO. We now have to come up with a principled position, and maybe then all these developments can fit into that puzzle piece. But let me open up this conversation. Major General Shashi Asthana joining us on the broadcast. I also have Wing Commander Praful Bakshi. Preity Uppala, editor of The Observer, is joining us from California, and Ambassador Dr. Deepak Vora is joining us. He happens to be in New York as we speak. If I can take the opportunity quickly, General Asthana, the Vice Chief, 2+2. For our viewers, can you help us understand what this 2+2 is all about? General Asthana, if you can hear me, sir. Okay, I'm going to assume not. Ambassador Vora, can you help us understand for our viewers watching what this 2+2, which fits into various levels of engagement that we have in the Indo-US strategic partnership, where does it fit in?
Thank you very much, Mr. Gulati, for this opportunity. Delighted as always to be on this wonderful channel and to learn from you and the other people. The 2+2 is a very, very important part of our growing relationship with the United States, whether in defense or in foreign affairs. It's the two most important people in terms of any kind of relationship: external relations, foreign relations, that we'd say, and defense. The two most significant elements in any country's relationship with any other. And now that this has taken off, become institutionalized, and has produced results over the years, you can see that it is a very, very significant change from the time that we were estranged democracies. So for those who are watching this 2+2 dialogue becomes very, very significant. Its significance being next only to that when the leaders of the two countries, the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of India, meet face to face.
Okay.
If you give me a moment, sir, if I have a minute, just want to tell you that, a landmark moment occurred in 2005 when the two countries signed this framework for civil nuclear cooperation and the new framework for US Defense-India relationship. And since then, the number of exchanges has been growing exponentially. I believe we have something like 50 annual military exercises between India and the United States, more for India than with any other country. And at this point of time, sir, let me just put it to you, the visit of the Vice Chief that you talked about to the United States, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it would have been a routine visit. But I believe the United States, sitting here in New York, that's the impression I get, has made a strategic bet. The bet is that India will decisively shape the military balance in Asia. This is an era of great power competition with China, when the US thinks that the People's Liberation Army is becoming very, very aggressive. And I believe that this wager will have a major impact on the future.
So it boils down to wish lists. Wing Commander Bakshi, it's going to boil down to wish lists. We've got the howitzers, we've got the Chinooks, we've got the Apaches, you've got the heavy lift aircraft. There might be other fighter aircraft that might be on the anvil. There'll be a lot of other things which, of course, public purchases we'll never hear about, at least in the public domain. We need material readily available and on the double. What do you suspect the wish list is going to be for the Vice Chief?
You're absolutely right. I'm really thankful you asked me this question. The question here is that India and America, off and on, at various intervals, have been thinking about the same thing of getting together and joining up in thinking process, in strategic processes, etc. Right from 1963 onward, it has been going on. I would draw your attention later on to 63, but I'll tell you now, this is will aspect now, as you see, they have now made, I won't say they have made a breakthrough, they have got a breakthrough, but the breakthrough has been achieved between the relationship of India and America, not only on the nuclear policy, but the question is on direct exchange programs of defense, equipment and training. And this was seen right from 2006 onwards, as you had series of air exercises, series of ground exercises, right from in all sectors. Not only this last air exercise which we conducted, which in China wrote a special report and said only India could perform, and actually they gave us more marks and said India outperformed America. Now this aspect has been taken very seriously by Americans, and they realize that we will now carry the baton through in this.
Okay. So I just want to look at the practical aspects of this, because a lot of rapid fire things are happening. You saw the meeting that happened.
We will be getting more. Now they are going to place in front of us a fresh deal of fighters.
Okay. So that's the obvious part which we will hear about publicly. What we will not hear about publicly is, of course, the other conversations, far more important ones, because it's not only the fact that he's going to the US, it's where in the US that the Vice Chief is going. He's going to the headquarters of the Indo-Pacific Command in Hawaii. He's not going to Washington. Okay, there's a difference between Washington and where he's going. So there are operational things that are going to be, of course, in discussion. Preity Upala, let's put the puzzle pieces together. A meeting in Japan, Pompeo, 26th of October, 2+2 meeting happening. We're expecting, of course, heads of state conversations to take place as well. Where are the puzzle pieces indicating us the frenzy of activity of which we have very little public information? What's actually going on?
Well, thank you, Mr. Gulati, for having me on your show. Always great to be on your wonderful show. This is incredibly important. Obviously, this meeting is expected to enhance the operational and strategic cooperation between the two armies. But one very important thing to remember is during this COVID, in the face of the even President of the United States having suffered the virus himself, most events have been canceled. Yet Secretary Mike Pompeo and Defense Secretary Mark Esper have not canceled this. That says volumes, and they're traveling all the way to India for this incredible meeting, which only shows the growing closeness between the two countries and the need to really strengthen this Asian NATO, if you will, whether it's in the form of the Quad or just if it's a US-India alliance independently. It's incredibly important. The Indo-Pacific Command, used to be called the Pacific Command, is actually the largest command of the US military, and they changed the name to emphasize the importance of not just the region of Southeast Asia, but specifically India. I think this speaks volumes for us, as well as the US are really understanding India's place in protecting its own strategic ambitions, and with a growing China and this ambiguity around what's going to be coming up in the next several months. I think this is really pleasing to hear.
So that's the larger perspective. Now, I want to just boil it down to the brass tacks. General Asthana, if you can hear us this time around.
Yes, I can hear you.
I mean, and nobody watching the broadcast is going to be naive enough to assume that all that the Vice Chief is going to be discussing in Hawaii is joint exercises. He's not representing the Navy there. Very real, practical things are going to be discussed, because not only as the head of the Indo-Pacific Command for the US fleet, it is also the nerve center for US intelligence. for their human monitoring, for their electronic intelligence, their satellite intelligence, and that's where they'll be headquartering all of their operational plans, their war gaming that they would be doing currently. We don't know what they'll be discussing, sir. So this is, of course, a speculation. But what would be important information that a meeting like this would actually put puzzle pieces together on?
Just to put the puzzle pieces together, the most important thing is the timing. The timing is such that India is confronting China, so is United States. Both are most affected by COVID. Both are most affected by the aggressive design of China. And therefore, after Quad, there was a need to give some more strategic messaging. Quad may not have, people may not have named named China in specific terms, but I think the message has reached the right places. And there is also a theory called as theory of strategic ambiguity, that don't talk too much, but keep doing your work. Now, this is the work which is in progress.
Okay, so can I put the puzzle pieces together, General? That in Japan, a decision has been made that we haven't heard publicly on what an operational Quad will look like for the first time.
Yes.
And then immediately afterwards, before they have the 2+2 meeting, the actualization, the realization of what the operational diplomats talking in Tokyo ain't going to operationalize militaries and navies working together. The navies and militaries will have to operationalize it. So we are seeing the first time when away from these military drills and naval drills, actual hard talk is going to take place of what our strategic plans are, what the situation on the ground is, what the Americans are gaming for, what their situation on the ground is, that this will be that heart to heart.
Yeah, and if I may add that Vice Chief being there are a lot of things to be talked of in terms of intelligence, in terms of cyber, in terms of other capabilities, in terms of drones, which is a very urgent requirement of ours, in terms of certain other arsenal, which we may not like to name. But I'm very sure that there is a lot on the table which can be discussed, which can be useful in the present confrontation. There is a certain crucial period before the plenum session takes place. We are expecting that this 20-25 days are going to be quite exciting, because China would like to do a little bit of probing actions. Okay. And both sides, I think the tug of war is going to continue.
Okay, so there's a practical value. There's a practical value to having US weaponry move in. The Apaches, we've discussed this, and the Chinooks have completely changed India's operational capacity in places like in and around the LNC. Ambassador Deepak Vohra, the premise that I'm trying to draw to the attention of our viewers here is that we are now seeing a pattern of activity which is not being publicly stated in a step-by-step approach for easy consumption in a guidebook for the rest of us, but can easily be deduced that we've had a diplomatic agreement of some sorts that has happened, even though it might not have reflected in the statement in Japan, and now we are seeing the actualization of it between two very senior ranking officials visiting, including the Vice Chief, to Hawaii.
You have hit the nail on the head. The signs are all there. The evidence is hiding in plain sight, and those who can't see it, well, they need to have their brains examined. You might recall, sir, it was not even a year ago that we had the first tri-service, the first ever tri-service, ground, naval and air forces exercise between India and the United States. I think it was called Tiger Triumph, lasted for a week. The signs are all there. It's very evident. We've had the Quad meeting. Now we had the Vice Chief going there. Then we are going to have the next round of 2+2. Very, very clear that the two countries are getting together in the face of perceived aggression.
Okay. So the question, Ambassador Vohra, is: do you suspect, in your best understanding, you're getting information from both sides, sir, both because of your geographical location right now. Do you suspect that the theory part of this is now over, as it regards? Now we're getting into the practical part.
The theory will continue, but the practical part is now going to be predominant. Theory is being converted into practice. We are seeing this happen in supply of defense equipment, joint exercises, and in a joint decision to confront the big bad bully in our region, sir.
Okay, so it would not be a leap of imagination, Wing Commander Bakshi, that the preparations that we are making for winter, the preparation that the Americans will be making for winter, and then discussing possible scenarios of what happens if the Chinese do this, if the Chinese do this, if the Chinese do this. Those practical conversations are now happening rather than just theoretical conversations of should we work together, not work together, Quad, what do we call it, don't call it, that this has now gone from theory into practice.
Absolutely. This is the most important thing, not to leave anything in doubt, because what happens in these diplomatic parlance, in these activities, lot is said, which is other side does not understand. Let me draw your attention. Just give me 30 seconds. After 1962, when we thought America did not come to our aid, actually America came to our aid in a very massive manner. They sent 3 squadrons of Hercules, which were introduced into American Air Force at that time, and round the clock they picked up our artillery and brought it to the northeast, which most of us don't know about it. Continuously for 25 days the sorties continued, but then the war was over, and after that they decided to have a joint exercise of 5 countries with India, Australia, Canada, America, United Kingdom and India, and in Kalaikonda they had that exercise.
Okay, and I can add to that.
We were not serious.
When I can add to that, the CIA was supplying, even Free Tibet forces at that point of time, and through the 50s. I wish could have continued longer, but it didn't. Praful Bakshi, so when we're talking about practice, we don't require American troops. We don't require the American Air Force to be patrolling somewhere around. We don't need that. What do we need actually? What will actually help?
We actually require their equipment, especially their air defense equipment, especially which deals with the missile interception, which deals with normal interception at high and low level. This equipment we lack. They come here, establish, train our personnel. That is very essential. I'm talking of tactical thing. I'm not talking of strategic. What we do at the nuclear level is different. And we will probably decide space aspect. And one very important thing, besides cyber, the biological warfare. Don't think it is history. Both countries suspect the Chinese will resort to some sort of a biological attack. And are we ready? Civil defense of our country will be prepared again as online with the...
potentially that's already happened. Okay, different perspective. Preity, elections are up now. What, 2 weeks are left, right? What do you suspect is happening? Are we now, should we be gearing up purely for a reactive response, where if the Chinese try to pull something immediately before or after the US elections, that we are able to respond in a coordinated manner? Or is there still a consideration that there might be a proactive intervention?
Oh, that's interesting. I feel like for President Trump, this is his last chance to really showcase his military might to his own people. And again, make foreign policy very much the central theme of his campaign. He's got 2 weeks left to drive the message home to his people that he is capable of countering the enemy and of curtailing the source of where this virus came from. And India, it happens to be the right place at the right time as well. I think it was great for Secretary Pompeo to make that point that 60,000 troops are now built up along the LAC, and he acknowledged that openly, and he also said that this affects their ally India adversely. So I think it's like a last chance to really showcase what America can do, and that it's capable of protecting its country, because quite frankly, COVID the results have not been very good for America. They have not really managed to contain this very well, considering they've got the highest number of deaths in the world, and relative to their population, that's too high.
For all the people
for all the people angry about COVID and angry about Chinese economic disabuse or financial scandals, do they really care so much in the US public of what's happening in Taiwan, South China Sea? Is it a hot potato issue? No, America has always been very insular, even with or without the elections. However, I think these are all pieces of a puzzle. It's like a domino effect. One thing affects the other. So they might not know what's going on in the Indo-Pacific or with Taiwan. However, they know that there is a big bully out there. They know that this whole situation was unleashed onto them, and they want answers. And when you have a president who is telling them that, hey, I got this.
So just for example, now I'm going into
into
theory because this is happily to say wild speculation, but this is just a theoretical question, rhetorical question, Preity. If, for example, a so far unknown island, something called Subi Reef or Mischief Reef that, let's face it, most of us had never heard about until a few weeks ago, if this was suddenly to be liberated from Chinese control in the South China Sea, would people in America cheer that?
Well, if America did the liberation, yes, because again, it would be a press point for them that, it's a big win for them. It's a big victory. So it depends who does the liberation and or the liberating, I should say. But I think America is looking to liberate, and President Trump always says, "I'm looking to mediate." He wants that Nobel Peace Prize.
Okay.
He wants to really manifest peace in the world in his own
well,
mind.
that's a very interesting perspective. I'm short of time, so I just want to touch upon this. General Asthana, again, I'm just discussing theory here, but in theory, sir, would it be useful if the Chinese felt the fury of some kind of a surgical strike on any front?
Yes, certainly. In fact, I'll be a little more specific now. Firstly, what we need from United States is that whatever arsenal they have deployed on the eastern seaboard and South China Sea, that should not get lifted and brought against us. That is number one. Number two, if we can motivate one of the countries whose claimant island has been taken away by China, if that gets liberated, certainly a fair amount of pressure will come on China. Thirdly, China has got a long vulnerability in terms of the sea lanes of communication. If we try and pose some kind of threat, even threat is good enough for them to deploy their resources all over the stretched sea lanes of communication, and that is going to outstretch China, which is going to be a very major problem for them.
No, I've made two suggestions in this regard. There is a lot of drug trade that happens in the Golden Triangle there. I think a lot of stopping of ships to search for drugs is a perfectly reasonable thing to do for multiple foreign navies, and I think that would be within the realm of international law. We're looking for drugs is very important. Praful Bakshi, Wing Commander, would it be useful, sir, in theory, for on some front, for the Chinese to feel the fury of a surgical strike taking out one asset?
It could be. We could actually tie up with Japan, probably a joint operation on one of the islands where they are having a problem. They could be doing it along with Taiwan, or Japan, India and Taiwan. Jointly it can be done. If there is a will, there is a way. There's no problem, it can be done.
Okay, if there is a will, there's a way.
Keep Chinese under pressure.
Okay, if there's a will, there's a way. Last word, Ambassador Deepak Vora. It has changed the way we do things because of the tactical advantage that we have on the ground in Galwan right now, along the lakes in Chushul. The fact that we have done the surgical strike once, twice, we've had the Balakot strike. They've been very surgical responses, but they've changed the dynamic. If such a response were to come, sir, do you think it would find takers in America?
Absolutely. The United States today is very angry about China. Sir, you know this better than I do, that we are in the phase of Chinese virus 2. You know that in Paris and London, they have declared curfew from today.
Correct.
From 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. The same thing is happening in the United States. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a surge, there's an increase in the number of cases. The people in this country, sir, in the United States, from my perspective, are angry with China. And anything that is done to contain China, to give it a slap across its face, would be widely welcomed.
So I'll leave it at that. I'm out of time.
But it will be welcomed.
This is the puzzle pieces of deduction, because don't expect a press note to come out from the government of India saying this is what our plans are and this is how we are coordinating with the Americans. But put the puzzle pieces together. You've had the Quad meeting, and the Quad meeting is deciding theory, is deciding policy, what will and should be done. It has to be put into practice.
Of course.
Yeah.
Xi Jinping has been coughing a lot at his last speech in Shenzhen. So we don't know what's happening.
Well, winter is coming, sir. We wish him the best of health. But
We don't.
the larger impact of this, the meeting of what the vice chief is going to be doing in Hawaii over the next 2 or 3 days is crucially important. Take it rest assured the Chinese are going to be deeply interested in what happened in Hawaii as much as they're going to be interested with what Pompeo is going to be doing when he meets with our external affairs minister. By the time that meeting happens now, you can well imagine that the conversation is going to be about what happens if this takes place, if this takes place, if this takes place. It's going to be gaming. The theory part is now being settled for at least the remainder part of this year. As the ambassador pointed out, some of it needs to play out. How do we get the South Asian countries, the ASEAN involved? What do we do here? What do we do here? But in very cogent action that we can take and the Americans can take, these conversations, or the Japanese or the Aussies, these conversations are very rarely happening. So this is not just about military drills. It could be an actuality. We don't know what's going to happen, but something could. And maybe some kind of a small lesson for the Chinese would be useful to end 2020 with. Thank you all.
For more such videos, subscribe to the Newsx YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.